a minute.
Yes, here we go. Yeah.
Do you have it? Or
Yep.
not?
Yeah. Fine. You can have it now. It was to record.
Right. Okay. Now, where was I? Right. You need to make sure they're as clear as possible and that they reproduce well. Now, I have a pet hate against graphs in Excel. I think they look really, 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 really ugly.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency, which is not very good, I admit, but it's still, you know, if I do it, other reviewers will do it. When I see Excel graphs, my teeth go on edge and I'm get more critical. Having said that, if you are very clever in Excel, you can do some really nice graphs. I will show you an example. I will find the graph afterwards and show you a graph that is nice that was done in Excel. I'll do that after the coffee break. But in general, the basic graph proposed by Excel is ugly because you don't have the legends on the axis. Often it's really weird color selection. You don't have a lot of power in making the graph nice. So I recommend either going the step further in Excel and making the graphic look really nice, or using a different package. And for those of you who know how to use R, there's a whole pile of graphical modules in R. You can do super things. I don't know how to use R, but you know, I can see everybody else is using it. So I really, really recommend it, because a lot of graphical programs for computers are awfully expensive and R is free. So I recommend that. Right, so we already had a look at some articles. And so you have prepared your tables and your figures. You have decided which ones you're going to use. You need to also decide an order for those tables and figures. And it should be an order that is logical, that starts from basic information and goes up towards the more complicated and crossed information world. So when you're going to be comparing different information types to get a result. So the ones that have the more complex analysis, they will come near the end of the series of graphs and figures and tables, whereas the more simple ones will come in the beginning. I'll come back to my favorite subjects of land use. Maybe your first graph will be soil type in the basin. Then you would have different land cover in the basin, and then you would cross them. And so it's like one part, another part, and then joined up. So you and your text that you use will guide the reader through these different figures and results. Always keeping in mind the questions and the hypotheses that you asked, because the text is there to clarify the information. It's to provide extra information so that we really know what's happening in the figures and tables. Okay. You need to refer to each table and figure individually and in the sequence that you have set up. And you need to clearly indicate the most important parts of each figure. So for example, you'll have a figure that shows land cover change over 20 years. You know, you're not going to describe each graph for the 20 years. You will describe the highlights. You will say land cover was relatively stable until 2005, when there was a big shift towards teak plantations. So you do that. People will look at the graphs. They'll be able to look at all the different details. They'll be able to identify the high points, teak plantations. And so you use your text to direct the attention of the reader. And go back again to what the importance of having clear questions and hypotheses, because it's that you are going to center. It's around those items that you center your discussion. You need to talk about obvious trends, increasing erosion with increased teak plantations, the important differences. Maybe in the river valleys, the erosion is less. The similarities, erosion is the same in the northern basins as in the southern basins, even if they have different soil type. The different correlations, the maximum, the minimums, you have to explain what you have in the data, but don't go into painful detail. You don't need to say things like, for seasonal trend, in January, temperatures started to increase, and then it got higher and higher and higher. In February, it was even more higher, and then March, blah, 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 blah. You could say temperature increases from January to August to a maximum of 32 degrees, and thereafter declined towards December, when a minimum temperature of 12 degrees was measured. You can see short, sharp, and precise, and some adjectives, but not 250. Do not present results for something for which you haven't shown the method. This sounds really obvious, but when you have a big study and maybe different aspects are split up into different chapters in your thesis or different articles, sometimes you get a bit lost in the relative methods and the results. So keep in mind, okay, I'm talking about land use here. Did I describe how the land use was measured, obtained? You need to really, this is something that happens quite a lot. You see a figure appear talking about, dredging frequency in Haiphong Harbor, and but there's no information of where this data came from. So, you need to make sure that's in the methods. And you need to write your results in a very clear, non-equivocal, non-confusing manner. They don't put too many convoluted sentences, so sentences that are going around and in circles. Short sentences, there's nothing wrong with having short sentences in the results. You do not need to do paragraph sentences where you cram everything into the sentence. It's not a problem if it's a bit sharp, a bit dry, bang, 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 bang. The sentences read like that. It's not a problem. It's not a literature exercise. It's presentation of scientific results. And only talk about each piece of information once. When I say once, I mean one, don't mean just one sentence. You can have several sentences around the piece of information, but don't talk about it in paragraph 1 and then go back in paragraph 3 and then maybe paragraph 6, because that will be spaghetti. So remember, the results is a section where results and material methods are sections where you can have that really nice lasagna building up and not spaghetti. Sophie hasn't been exposed to Emma's theory of lasagna and spaghetti, so I will explain that to you afterwards. It's to do with the flow of English in an article. Or the structure of the text in an article is when it goes from the introduction, and then we have a bit of discussion, and then we're over in the methods, and then we come back to the introduction. That, when it goes in all directions, that's what I call spaghetti. And the lasagna is when each section is structured clearly and flows on from one another. I'm a big fan of Italian food. So letters. Right?
What about ravioli?
Well, those are little packets of information. No. Well, we don't have packets of information either. That's heading towards spaghetti land for me. Remember, only relevant results should be mentioned, and don't distract the attention of the reader by talking about stuff that is irrelevant to your question. Maybe it's relevant to something else, but yes, Stefan.
No, just when I read this slide on only relevant result, and well, we are preparing a book on the one topic. It's not important to describe right now, and I review some chapter, and the topic of the guy is from Myanmar. Is very, very nice. Very, it's about land and the relationship between China and the Myanmar government. But
cool.
The thing is too activist attitude. And even if the research topic is very, very nice, he has to trying to following what we try to explain to him, to rewrite the paper, because we can see, we can feel that research is here, but it's too activist, and sometimes it could happen because your research can keep yourself, and you have to follow some methodology kits, some process, and to stick with what the reviewer are waiting for. So that's it. It's just a small point, but I think quite important to underline.
Yes, I agree that we need to have some distance from what we're doing. In general, unless we've been asked for something that is our own opinion, but generally we need to have some distance in our position relative to the work. Yeah.
Especially in social sciences, when you think that there's no methodology, it's only emotion, feeling, what is not the case. But you can lose yourself.
Yes, I think it can happen as well for people that are, I can imagine with climate change, biodiversity, really big hot subjects like that, where we can get a little bit subjective instead of objective in the way that we present. Yes. Sometimes my favorite, it happens to me, in fact, that's why I'm laughing, because often in the last paragraph of my articles, I have myself what I call a little rant, where I'm complaining that more money needs to be invested in research in developing countries. And so I put that as a little rant at the end of a lot of my articles, and sometimes it gets through and sometimes it doesn't. So I accept when the editor says, I don't know about that. That's a little bit too subjective, so please take it away. So I take it away. But sometimes but I can allow myself to do that. I don't recommend that you guys do that, because it's not a good plan. So I said you need to present your results in a sequence that logically supports or provides evidence against your hypothesis, answering your question. Yes? Oh. Well, so there we are. You know, this is something that is really important. And I think in the present time of COVID, we now understand the importance of negative results. But I've been putting this in my classes for a long time. It's extremely important to report your negative results because the absence of an effect is interesting. You can't just, it's not that you've badly done the experiment. It's really important to know that something doesn't work. And so I really recommend publishing negative results. Maybe they don't support your hypothesis, but don't fall into the trap of thinking that negative results are bad data. For example, what could we have? The impact of switching from a chemical pesticide to a biological pesticide. Well, you know, maybe the results will say that there was still as much death to bees as there was with the chemical pesticide, with this new biological one. And it's important to know that. It's important that that gets published. Don't say, oh, no, it didn't work. I'm not going to publish it. Because it probably did work, and that's why it's good and why it needs to be published. Remember, provide as much information as possible about the nature and the differences of the relationships. Don't just say A and B were significantly different. Maybe you've done your stats. You need to say how they're different, by how much. Report the direction, whereas it A was greater than B, A was 75% higher than B, things like that. Remember the word significant in English, in scientific articles, it's always linked to a statistical measurement, a statistical test. Do not use significant if you haven't, or significance, if you haven't a statistical test next to it, because it's kind of like an alert word for statistics, and a reviewer will say, no, where's the statistical value? You're talking about significance. There's many other words that you can use in English, synonyms of that, but be careful with the statistical use of significance, the word significance. Keep in mind your objective. And don't put in too many graphs and tables. You'll see by the length of the journal, but I would say a small table, maybe a bit bigger table, it's okay, and maybe 3 graphs. Depends on the length. Many journals nowadays, they limit the number of tables and graphs you can use. But nowadays we have my favorite friend, which is the supplementary materials section, where we can put our big tables and big figures. And often the reviewer will say, I think this figure can go into a supplementary section. It means it's online, it's not in the body of the article. And it's a good way to publish other graphs. Don't make your tables too big, because they should fit on one page, ideally. Depends on the journal again, but try not to make gigantic tables. It poses a problem for typesetting, and maybe it will eat up a lot of space. Because maybe the journal just wants articles of 5 pages, and if you have 3 pages of table, maybe not so good. Keep in mind your units. So, like for example, the mean length was 10 meters, or the maximum time was 140 meters. You need to keep in mind the statistics you used and descriptive statistics to show that how that was dealt with. If you have measures of variability, put the plus and minus in to show the error value. And likewise, when you have a series of numbers, you would do 5, 10, 15, and 20 meters. You wouldn't do 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters. It's really heavy. Yes, Benjamin?
No, I was just using the the button reaction in my screen.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it's a very good point, and it's really annoying when you see 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters. That's it.
It's
I just
really,
wanted
really
to say
heavy.
great, you know.
Okay, right.
But by the
So
way,
we
since I'm talking, maybe just remind you that we are supposed to have a coffee break, a short pause, more or less, in these times.
Oh, if you want, we can have the break now.
Or it can
It's
be a little bit
okay.
later. Just don't forget.
No, because I have 6 more slides in this section, so we can have the break now, and then
Yes.
we'll come back, finish that, and we have some questions too. So we'll do those questions from Putapong and Ko.
Okay. All right. So
Right.
I didn't want to
Short
interrupt
coffee
you.
break.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
but
realize I interrupted you with my. So let's try to the other one. Yes, this is the other one. Yeah.
oh, okay. Right. Okay. Well,
So coffee break, 5 minutes.
yes.
Okay, so I suppose we can go back to our training.
Yes. So I see we have 2 questions. First one from Kong, or the second one from Kong, but which is quicker to answer, is how about the position of the figure in the table before or after the text description? So normally, or in general, let's say in general, when you submit a manuscript for publication, the tables and figures are given at the end of the text body. And I mean after everything else at the end. And sometimes the submission sites require that you send a separate file with your figures and table. In fact, separate files. So an individual file of each table and figure. When you will refer to the table and figure in the text, you will, you can place the reference to the figure at the end of the line or in the middle. I shall show you an example, which will also respond to the request of Putapong, I think. It was the other question. So, right. You can see here that they typeset it, the journal. So this is the legend of the figure that's above here, this guy here. But here we have a section in the results. So, blah, 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 figure 4. It's at the end of the first part of the sentence. I put the reference. Sometimes it's at the end of the sentence where we refer to it. Here we go. There was also a significant interaction effect of carbon dioxide and leachate history at both of these ways. And it's table 3. So it's at the end. That's how you can present it in the text. Now, the question of voilà, conversé. Right. The question of Putapong. When we add tables and figures, what should we write in the text about this? Yes, exactly. Don't repeat everything that you see in the table. This is true. You know, it is redundant and it wastes words if you've got a word limit. And so you should only talk about the highlights. The things that you want to bring out. For example, DOC concentration increased significantly over the 72-hour incubation, particularly for the water control. So it's because I wanted people to look at the water control, what was going on. Fluorescence increased significantly less for a specific type of incubation, indicating a negative direct effect of CO2 on CO2 production. So I don't say that it went up for water and then it went down for the other one and up for the other one. You don't need to do that. But if your graph is well done, you can be economical. In fact, in this paragraph, let's see, it's one paragraph. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines. We talk about table 3 and the panel of 4 figures. So you need to be succinct, short and precise, and only highlight the points that you want to discuss. You guys can look at this article because Benjamin will send you it. That's the Russian Yuan et al. AS article. And you can see how it was formulated. Now, I try and well, I recommend not to do this, even though I do it myself. Sometimes it's I can't fight against it, but to put the direct and indirect effect of increased CO2 concentration, is shown in figure 3. What I probably should have put would have been something like, we found big changes or large changes, significant differences in the direct and indirect effects of increased CO2 concentration on metabolic capacity, brackets, figure 3. You don't need to start a sentence with, or each paragraph with, figure 3 shows. We know what it shows because the legend tells us of the figure. So that's a way of having something a bit more smooth in terms of text. Voilà, on va arrêter celle-là et on va regarder this guy. I think it's this one. Yes, units. So we'll just finish off the results section rapidly. Remember I said the units, it comes at the end after a series and not to 5 meters, 10 meters, 50 meters, and 20 meters. Don't go over each value from the table and figure. It's just what we were saying about the question from Utapon. Don't put the same data in a table and a figure. It's you need to decide which one is the best way of presenting what you want to say, how it links to your objectives. That, you know, it's a waste of space, and the reviewer will see that and tell you to get rid of one of the other. Sometimes they help you and they tell you which one is the best, but sometimes it's you and your co-authors who have to decide. And try to avoid reporting raw data values in figures. They should be summarized as means and percentages because normally you have replication. Doesn't work like that. Remember to do it based on write your text based on the sequence of tables and figures. Remember, you need to already have them in a sequence before you start writing. It may change, but it's best to have them in the sequence already before you write. What I do is I have a double screen. I put my figures on one screen and I write on the other one, and I go through them like that. And I find that really helps. Sometimes, you know, it helps to make notes on each table and figure of the points that you want to bring out. So that could be good. Numbering tables and figures. When you number tables in the text, they are called table 1, table 2, table 3, and so on. But it's not quite the same thing with the figures. The first figure is figure 1, and then you can say fig point 2, fig 3, fig 4. It's just like the formalism of writing that. You must have your legends. We talked about that. For tables, the legend goes at the top, but you can have a footnote at the bottom. And for the figure, the legends are at the bottom. Don't ask me why, it's just like that. And you usually read the figures from left to right and then top to bottom. That's how usually they're read. This is what I was saying about the abbreviation. Generally, we don't see tab 1. In fact, the only place where I see tab 1 is with PhD students in France. So often they write that. I don't know if it's, maybe in French literature it's accepted, I don't know. So when I'm evaluating the results, when I'm a reviewer, I ask, can the reader assess the results? Can the reader assess the results based on the data that was provided? Is the information straightforward and not confusing? Are the controls adequate? Are the statistical methods used appropriate for the results that have been presented? And are the graphs clear? Are the colors clear? And can we photocopy the graph or the table easily? And are the legends appropriate? So when you're constructing your research, your results sections, keep those questions in mind. Keep asking yourself, and it will help. Okay, so now we need to have a look for the discussion section. A discussion section in 30 minutes. Oh, it's going to be fun, I think. So you've written your introduction, you've done your methods, you've done your results, you have some ideas on the super points that you want to bring forward in your discussion. You have your objectives, you have your hypotheses. You know, normally when you're going into the introduction section, you know what you want to do, what you want to say, and how you want to present that in the wider context. Remember, in your introduction, you've already developed the context. We know the importance of the question. Well, here you're going to link with what you wrote in the introduction, but putting your information, your data forward and putting it into context. So building on what was done before. When we get to the end of the discussion, it needs to be clear what the new thing, your work, has brought forward, how it has advanced our understanding of the question, of your objectives. So that's the ultimate objective of the discussion. Okay. Oh. So, what is the function? It's to interpret your results in the light of what is already known. It explains our new understanding of the subject once we read your work, your results. Where, you know, we've taken the next step, and where has that taken us to? You always link with your introduction via the questions and the hypotheses that were set up and the literature that you cited. So you're going to have some of the same literature, some of the same work that's cited in the introduction will be taken into the discussion, will be cited in the discussion. But you do not just take the introduction and plonk it into and stick it into the discussion and then stick your results on the end. It won't work. You need to blend them together and you need to put them into a context. Always keeping in mind what is the new part and how does it fit into the big jigsaw of the question. Now remember, I said that the introduction was like a funnel. Well, the discussion is the funnel the wrong way up, because you will have some specific discussion of your results. You're going to say, we found this, and Bouclier et al., he found that, and this work is similar to results of Bouclier et al., except we found that dredging frequency in Haiphong Harbor is having a negative effect on fish populations, whereas Bouclier et al., they just said that, you know, it wasn't really having much impact. The differences between your results and those of Bouclier et al. Are, well, you know, they measured in the springtime, you measured in the autumn, maybe that's the thing, you will construct around that question. That's what is putting it into context. You need to address the weaknesses in the work. This is something that people don't like doing because they don't want to admit that their work isn't perfect. Nothing is perfect in science, nothing. And so it's, if you address these questions clearly and you explain why the choices were made, in general, the reviewer will be more accepting of the weaknesses in the document, in the work, than if you just ignore them. For example, maybe you measured land cover in April. No, see, April in lab, just before, just at the point where the dry season is switching to the rainy season. For perennial plants, that's okay, but for annual crops, maybe it's not so good. So you would explain that our land use was collected in April due to technical constraints. You know, maybe the farmers don't want you going in their fields. And we realized that this may be a weakness of the work, but we still think that this data is valuable. I will show you a paragraph on how I explain the weaknesses in the work when we come along a bit, because I want us to look at the other sections. And then you finish with a global conclusion where you put it into the global context. It's a bit like the beginning of the introduction, huh? Where you talk about, I don't know, the why your subject is important in a global sense. Try to stick with this format for your discussion, and it will be easier to structure it. And I recommend using the subheadings, of course. This is my thing, the subheadings. So your fundamental questions that you need to answer here in the discussion is, do your results provide answers to your testable hypotheses? And how do you interpret those findings? Kong is having a really hard time with his internet connection today, I think. Do your findings agree with what the others did? If not, maybe there's an alternative explanation. Maybe it's a design flaw in the experiment. This is where you'll talk about your weaknesses. So explain how it fits in. You cannot, in a discussion, ignore the literature, the published literature. This is where you have to be really, really up to date and clear on what work was done in the past to put yours into context. If not, and in the discussion, you need to be citing articles. I have, what was it I saw? I saw a document not that long ago where the discussion, there were 2 citations in a discussion of about 6 pages. No, you won't get away with that. You need to say what is the new understanding of the problem that you investigated, and you can also provide some future next steps. For articles that are part of a series, I often recommend putting in something like, this work highlights the need for regional level models of land use. And then the next article that we will publish will be about a model of regional level land use. So you can open the door for future work that you know you're going to publish. It sounds a bit sneaky. It's maybe not very, but you know, all's fair in love and war and publications almost. So I recommend doing that. I do it all the time. And it's not one of the sentences that the reviewer tells me to delete. Not like my my plaidoirie for more investing more money in research. Use the active voice where we can. That means we found. However, if you are the only author on an article, it would be, the active voice would be I. Please avoid using I, like I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, because it sounds really aggressive. And try to avoid it. If you're the only author, you need to change the way you structure the phrases, because I just sounds so harsh. Active voice is quite difficult as well, because we're not so used to it. It's a very American style of writing, but it's become more and more prevalent in other English writing. Be careful for phrases that are too long. Remember I said in the results you could have short phrases. You can maybe have a little bit longer phrases, so they're not like bullets. In the discussion, it shouldn't be like bullets. In the results, it can be like bullets. But you need to be concise, and you need to be clear what you want to say. So don't put too many flowery adjectives in there. Questions here? Can you find this? Yes, Benjamin will send you the slides, of course. You can even use them to give classes in your own institutes if you want. In your discussion, you need to also discuss the results for everything you presented. Footnotes. I have a hard time with footnotes. I have a really hard time with footnotes, but I think it's something that's used a lot in social sciences, the footnotes, and it's probably just a question of habit. Yeah, I prefer not to say when we can use the footnotes because I don't use them, but if Stefan or Benjamin wants to talk about footnotes, you're welcome. I've seen footnotes in the methods and in the introduction. Sometimes, yeah, I know where. When, for instance, one of my colleagues was talking about water quality, and there are different methods for measuring water quality and access, more access to water. And so if you use one of the United Nations methods for measuring access to improved water sources, it's something, it's like if people can go one time in a year. And so she had put something like, in Burkina Faso, access to improved water resources was considered to be high using the Langholm index. Footnote. The Langholm, and she had put Langholm index shows that, calculates that improved water access is if the person can go to the well once a year. I think it's really low. And so this was, it's when you're adding precisions about acronyms perhaps, or about certain structure. Yeah, me and footnotes are not good friends. I admit, that's another one of the things when I have data articles to review, I tell them to change the footnote, usually. Discuss your results in the same sequence. Look, we shall come to the limitations. Discuss in the same sequence as presented in the results, providing your interpretation and what they mean in the larger context, so referencing other articles. And don't waste time restating your results. If you need to remind the reader of the result to be discussed, use linking sentences, bridging sentences that relate the result to the interpretation. You can say things like, we observed a particularly high impact of carbon dioxide on alpine lakes. This has also been shown by, so you see, you have a phrase, but you won't say, in our alpine lake experiment number 3, we saw that carbon dioxide increased by 55%, the number, You see, it's a short sentence, it links, and it will make the reader think, oh yeah, that was the graph 4, okay. So that, refer correctly to the findings of others to support your interpretations, cite correctly. Sophie will talk about that on Friday. It's also linked to plagiarism that you will see tomorrow. Use your subheadings, even if you don't keep your subheadings for the submission phase. I recommend for the writing that you use the different subheadings. And it helps, it really helps structure your different paragraphs. And be aware of mistaking a result for an interpretation. My husband is watering the garden. I will shut my window. Voilà. Sorry. Be wary of mistaking the reiteration of a result for an interpretation. That means don't just repeat a result without putting it into context. And don't present new results in the discussion that are not presented in the results. Now, sometimes we're tempted in the discussion to say, and we also noted that, okay, maybe you saw that, but why isn't it in the results? So, you know, be very, very, very wary of that. It happens. I mean, sometimes even I get carried away and I start talking about something for which I have shown no method and no results, and it's not a good idea. Remember, introduction, what we did in the discussion. We conducted an experiment to investigate the impact of dredging in Haiphong Harbor on fish biomass. We found that. There you go. Your discussion has started. Your new additions, we show that increased dredging leads to fish death. Previous work had shown that dredging had no effect on fish death, but there was a difference between our work and their work was the frequency and the timing of the dredging. So then, you know. And your limitations. Yes, you must, to come back to the question of luck, you must mention your limitations. It's what I called weaknesses in the other slide. I will show you an example of some weaknesses. Let me see. So we have this guy, here we go. Right. We observed quantitative reading. Right, here we go. I underlined it in yellow so I could see where it started. So this is my way of explaining that I have weaknesses in my experiment. So you don't need to start with a question of this work was rubbish, but we still did it anyway. No, you need to, it's like a gift, you know. Sometimes the most important part of the gift is the packaging. And it's how you formulate your phrases. So here we have. This was an explanatory study with a short time scale. Was a this is, you know, in ecology, this can be a big problem, the time scale question. our terrestrial and aquatic systems were also decoupled. They weren't joined together, as would happen in a basin, a catchment. And we added the leachate once instead of via several simulated precipitation episodes, because in this work, we wanted to show the impact of soils on a lake ecosystem. The soil was incubated under elevated CO2. Obviously, we couldn't put a whole catchment in a greenhouse and incubate it. So explain. And then once you've said what all your weaknesses are, you start by this wonderful word in English, nevertheless. Nevertheless means that even so, we did all this really badly, but we still think it's really good. And I recommend that you guys, when you write your limitations paragraph, you do one little sentence explaining some of the limitations, and then you say, nevertheless, because if the research was done correctly, there's no reason why your data goes in the bin. So this is some tricks. Benjamin will send you this article. And in almost all of my articles where I address the weaknesses of the work, we have sentence 1 and then sentence 2, nevertheless. And sometimes, not in this one, there's even a moreover. So you have the nevertheless, and then you have the moreover, blah, 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 blah.
And
it's like,
could you have a be that as it may?
Oh, that's really, Ota, that's really snobby.
Okay.
Be that as it may, I don't like, no. Okay. For me, that sounds really like, be that as it may. It's really nasty.
The bad guy in Harry Potter, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's that I can hear the headmaster saying that. That's exactly why I don't like it. Sophie might not feel like that with me because maybe she wasn't traumatized by a headmaster. But oh, look here. You can see, and I was talking about opening up the door to new subjects. It is clear that any future experiment will need to take into account the complexity, blah, blah, blah. So, you can say this type of thing too. Okay. I shall go back to my, to the PowerPoint. Let me see where it is. Discussion is here. One thing about Zoom is you can't switch from documents easily. You have to come out of the sharing and go back in, I think. So, the reviewer in general, they ask the following questions. Did the authors comment adequately on their results? Have they explained why and how their study differs from published results? You need to know your literature. Do the authors discuss the potential problems and limitations? Yes, and not only that, they have put nevertheless. And are the author's conclusions supported by the results? You need to be careful about this as well, because sometimes we get so carried away that we think that our results tell us something that they don't. Because we really, really want to see something, and so we decide, oh, I'll just write that in the conclusions. That's maybe not the way to go about it. Because you have often a summary section. Now, sometimes it's the last paragraph of the discussion, and sometimes it's in a separate section. It can be called summary or conclusions. Hong is back. Oh dear. Poor thing. Must be a bit stressful trying to, yeah. I think we need to congratulate Gong on his persistence for trying to connect. It's, yeah, I understand it's difficult. Yeah, you need to stress the most relevant findings of the study. So you go really to the heart of what the result is. What is the most important point? It's what we call the take-home message of the study. It's a little digested text on what the study was about. It's not a repetition of the abstract. That is something when you're reviewing an article, and I get to the end and I'm like, I've seen that sentence before. And I go back and I read the abstract and I see the same sentence. So don't do that. It makes it look as though you're lazy and you don't care. And so please avoid doing that. And it justifies and explains your conclusions of the study, and it can give some new directions as well. Well, this I will leave for Sophie for Friday, the reference part. So that is kind of the end of the slides, the discussion. We were quite quick, but I think you guys know what the different sections are, and you can look at the articles, some articles, to find out how they structured their discussion. We will have as well the article from Aquatic Sciences, one of mine, to look at. And you can see how it was done. And I can send you, I have another one where we really went into detail about the limitations, because the reviewers asked for that. You still accepted, you know. I think if you're honest about your limitations in the study, I think that's what is probably the most important point, is being honest and not trying to sell something for what it's not trying to get something published that's not really that's a bit too expansive, embroidering too much. Yes,
Emma? Yes, I think I entirely agree with you. To promote, I mean, it is necessary to be honest, but maybe not expose the limitations at the very beginning in the introduction.
Oh no, absolutely. I wholly agree.
Abstract. Yeah.
You saw what I did. Mine is at the end of the discussion.
Yeah. So live,
I recommend,
don't do that.
In general, no. Don't. I recommend doing it in the second to last paragraph of the discussion. You're not burying it, but maybe a little bit. Yeah. Don't start your discussion with, we found this, the weaknesses of this study were, no. It needs to be after you have set the scene and integrated your data into the global picture, into what's been shown by the other articles and the other publications. And yeah, okay. It's important to present it. There's no need to put it as a central piece of the work. It's clear. I wholly agree. Yes, as they say, you have to be honest, but not too much. And don't go into painful detail about the weaknesses. You saw how I wrote the weaknesses. It was one sentence. Yeah. So just, you show that you recognize that things weren't as perfect as they could have been, but often for fieldwork, you have technical difficulties. You can put that. Sometimes for analytical work, you have technical difficulties as well. And sometimes I will put a phrase of, we were unable to, one of the critique that we get a lot in fieldwork is that, okay, you guys went once and you measured water quality once. Okay. But going into certain regions in West Africa, we're not allowed to go a lot. It costs a lot of money. There is no research infrastructure in some areas. And so, it's what it is. And so usually what I put is due to technical difficulties, we were unable to return to the site a second time. It's very euphemistic, but it's honest, but it's euphemistic. Euphemistic means making it sound gentler than it really is. Trying not to be too brutal. Yes. So I don't know if any of you guys have some questions. I think some of you are tired. I've been yakking for nearly 2 hours. Yakking is blah, 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 blah.
Oh, Mai wants to share some different things between almost Vietnamese articles and international articles. Please, Mai.
Yes.
We're listening. Oh, we're reading. Don't you want to talk? Come on. Mai, talk to us.
Ah, yes. The formatting of the citation information, yes. I think Sophie will address this on Friday. It's one of my...
Foreign journals articles approach, including use, citation, usually given the name. Okay, yeah. Well, good point, Mai.
I think I saw something crazy, like there are 69,000 journals and something mad like that I saw. I am prepared to bet there are 69,000 different formats for writing references.
Citation, yeah.
Blah.
Yeah.
Something that it's one of my pet hates, I have to admit. It's clear. That and Excel graphs.
Right.
Let me see. Let me have a look and see if I can find another article where I bury my weaknesses inside the text. Let me see. That I can, if it's what I'm thinking, I'll be able to send you those.
While you are looking for it, I remind everybody that tomorrow we will talk about ethics and intellectual property, maybe plagiarism if we have time, and that you have to remember homework 4, which is about presentation of rules and reglement, how it is organized in your country in relation to these topics, intellectual property, ethics, plagiarism, etc. How does it work in your country? And I remember you that you have to do this collectively, which I know is a bit challenging considering the situation and being entirely online, but please try to organize yourselves at national level. And tomorrow morning, I need the one that has been designated by the collective, by the group, as the speaker to present. Maybe 5-10 minutes. You will have the opportunity to use a PowerPoint file and to give us a short presentation about the situation and the rules, the practices in your country. And of course, you can take examples from your own experience and institutions. So we will be interested in knowing, for example, in your institution, do you have an ethics committee or something like that, or an ethics department, which have to give you some kind of authorization to publish or to control that your methodology respects some ethical rules or things like that? Or how does it work in terms of intellectual property when you go into the field and perform some interviews with very, very poor populations. How do you deal with this, the question of maybe the remuneration, giving money to the people you interview, things like that. How does it work in terms of names in the publications between your director of research and your maybe master's degree working with you, things like that. Anyway, so remember that, try to organize yourselves so that tomorrow we won't face a big black screen. Thank you. So maybe if you have things to conclude.
Yes, no, I will send you this other article here, and it will be called Rochelle Nualetel SciReps. The weaknesses are hidden in the subheading methodological aspects, so you guys can read that. And this is a graph that was done in Excel. So as you could see, it is possible. So yeah,
it is what?
Yeah.
What did you say? It's possible?
Possible to do nice graphs in Excel.
Possible. Yeah. Okay.
But it took a lot of time.
Yeah.
But you know, it is possible. Yeah. So Benjamin will send you this too, and I also have highlighted a phrase on how we're opening the door to another paper.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
about that in social and human sciences, I would say it's really common and almost compulsory to have a. Generally, I would say in the conclusions, but not necessarily. It's often in the conclusions, but very often we have an opening, and it's also a way to balance a little bit what we have just said. That, okay, we just almost always only open one door to other issues which require extra investigation, etc., etc. And also a way to make sure that we will still have work in the future. You know, we prepare the next stage.
Exactly, it's important sometimes, because sometimes when people are reviewing your project, they will read your previous work, and maybe they'll read it quite quickly and they'll say, yeah, that's right, that's a good idea. So, yeah.
May I have
okay, guys.
Okay.
Yes.
We had more questions. Oh, homework.
One question, please.
PowerPoint presentation, right? No need a Word file. Yes, only PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, Python. Yeah.
Okay.
I have to leave you tomorrow. Okay, bye.
Can I have one question, please?
Yes, who is speaking?
Yes, Chang. It's Chang, I think.
Chang. My name is Chang.
Yeah.
Yes. I would like to ask Emma, could you please tell me about the techniques snowball in collecting data in qualitative research? How to use?
I don't know. I don't know what snowball technique is. I'm sorry. Maybe we can find that. I will try and find you an answer for Friday.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, there we are. Thank you, Chang, for that question.
I'd like to share a little bit about snowball collection, data collection.
Yes.
It means that the collection is from one another. For example, we collect the data from Mr. A, and Mr. A tell us about Mr. B. So we go to Mr. B. Here, a snowball collection.
Right. It's like doing things in a chain. Okay.
That's
in a village, they can use this. We can survey the village about the community service. Yes.
Thank you, but I heard from my professor. He said that if you come to ethics part, is not allowed to do that, because once you listen to from the one, and this person introduce you to another person, so that's somehow causing bias. So it's now changing. So I would like to ask Emma about that.
This,
Yeah.
maybe this is something you will discuss tomorrow, in fact, that how you transfer ethics and deontology to in groups. I don't know, but I'll make a note about that, and then we can maybe come back to that subject on Friday.
Yes, please.
And
Yeah.
we can, yeah, if you haven't discussed it tomorrow, mention and we'll note that for tomorrow too. So guys, I have to leave because I have another meeting soon.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Benjamin. Bye-bye.
I will send you the link for tomorrow's webinar, and tomorrow will be with Claire and you guys presenting your national situation about ethics and intellectual property. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.